Welcome back to another episode of Discovering Your Mission with Dr. Mordecai. On today, we have a special conversation with a true leader in higher education. My guest, Dr. Matt Daly, is beginning his 28th year in education and currently serves as the Assistant Vice President and Dean of Students at Idaho State University. Over his career, he has served as a teacher, athletic coach, and academic program administrator, all while building impactful programs for first-generation students. He is also the co-editor of the three-book anthology series, Rethinking Higher Education Through the Strengths and Insights of First-Generation College Students. Today, we'll dive into his journey from coaching baseball to leading student success initiatives, his insights on first-generation identities, and why mattering beyond belonging must be at the center of how we serve students. Greetings, everyone. Once again, it's Dr. Mordecai, and I am here with an educator that has an amazing story. He's doing amazing work. Currently serves as the Assistant Vice President and Dean of Students at Idaho State University. We'll get into that in a little bit, but really also want to talk about his work in publishing. He's the co-editor of How First-Generation Students Navigate Higher Education Through an Embrace of Their Multiple Identities. None other than Dr. Matt Daly. Thanks for being with us, Matt.
It's a real pleasure, Dr. Brownlee. I really am looking forward to our conversation together. Thanks for having me.
Listen, hey man, we're going to have a good time. You have an amazing book. I'm going to be sure to continue to promote this book. We'll talk about this a bit more. But you have an interesting journey that I believe started with you teaching preschool and then athletics. Let's kind of start there. How did you end up from preschool now to Idaho State University?
Right. It's a fun journey, and that probably could take a lot of our time together in itself. But I think I knew that I always wanted to be an educator. I just had some really good teachers and mentors and coaches, if you will. And that was always something that I was excited about. And I think I really envisioned myself as maybe being a high school teacher and maybe a coach. And out of grad school, I was teaching 6th, 7th, and 8th grade down in Corpus Christi, Texas, and then kind of caught the bug to coach a little bit. So I was a college baseball coach for about 15 years. And then as I became a dad and a husband and father, I realized that maybe being a college coach and a father might not be, mutually beneficial to both. So I decided to go back in the classroom, and they had me teaching preschool through 8th grade PE. So that's kind of where I went and transitioned that way, and then was shoulder tapped to build a first gen program from scratch at the University of Portland. And so that's really how I got involved with first gen work and really have caught that bug and kind of where we're at today. Yeah.
That's an awesome story, man. That's an awesome story. Shout out to Corpus Christi, Texas.
Yes.
Got to ask you, Dr. Daly. So now you're on this journey. You choose a lifestyle and a commitment towards service that is going to be more in line with you being a present father. I heard that. I want to be sure to name that, which I think is a lesson in itself for those that are watching this. But let me ask you this, because there's a lesson there. Was that a hard choice for you to make? What was it that had you say, you know what? I need to choose family?
That's a great question. It was a hard choice, and I've talked to some of my colleagues that are coaches too, and I think it's actually an interesting segue with our conversation. I think a big part of my identity then was in being a coach, and I think that being a coach it was one of the identities that really resonated and what that meant. And so I think it was okay to make the choice to be an excellent father and husband instead of being an excellent coach. Like I wanted to prioritize that. But I think it took some time to really understand what my own personal identity was if it wasn't a coach. And that was a part of my own journey, is trying to really understand, okay, that maybe a lot of my value set is not so much in the profession, but in how I interact with other people, if that makes sense. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And there's a lesson there. And I just wanted to be sure we pulled what we could out of that. Now, my friend, I'm going to transition to the book. So the book, again, I'll say the name, First Generation Students Navigating Higher Education Through an Embrace of Multiple Identities. Lot there. Let's kind of pull this apart. First, let's start with the first generation student. Let's start there. First generation student. Can you unpack that for us? I don't want to make the assumption that those that are watching and listening to this fully understand that
Yeah.
component of the identity. And then you go into the embrace of multiple identities. So, two core factors that want to give you space to unpack that.
Yeah, and I appreciate the time to do that. I think, when we talk about just college students, there's a lot of identities that really resonate with them. And as you start to get to know them and have interactions with them, lot of, depending upon what's important to them, there's some identities that are very visible. It could be a gender, it can be a race or ethnic identity. It can also be things such as like academic identity. Like, what does that mean? And first generation, it's an interesting concept because it's one of the identities that I think it's maybe late blooming, if you will, with a lot of students. They don't maybe realize that they are first generation until they're engaged into that conversation. But what it really means in a nutshell is that they are the first in their family to pursue a 4-year college degree. So it might be that typically it means that mom and dad did not earn a 4-year college degree. They may have gone to community college. They may have just graduated from high school. They may have not done any schooling at all. But it's when their parent or guardian has not earned a 4-year college degree that makes them the first generation to be pursuing college. And I think there's a lot of different definitions to what first gen means. In fact, we did a study at one point. There's like 12 different definitions, and
Mm.
there's even some literature out there going, well, who's first gen? Well, it really depends who's asking. And so I think one thing that's interesting, and we talk about actually in this book early on, is the identity is tricky because there's so many different ways that it can be interpreted by folks. So that's a big part of kind of how we start this book, to be honest with you.
Got it. Got it. Got it. So then, if I am someone and I'm looking at the title of this, how do I see this book in a way that resonates with me? If I'm seeing this title, How Generation Students Navigate Higher Education Through an Embrace of Multiple Identities. Is this specific for some who are serving in certain roles? How does this book speak to, I guess, the wholeness of higher education?
I think that's a great question too. And I think what's interesting is a lot of it has to do with the contributors that
Yeah.
contributed some of these chapters. Some of them are professors. And so I
Mm.
think they really can answer, they really try to unpack that question from, their lived experience, either as a first gen college graduate and now a researcher that's interested in this work. There's a lot of practitioners that really have tried to unpack, what it means to be first generation and what these multiple identities might be. What's even pretty fascinating too is we had 3 recent first generation college graduates contribute the last chapter, and they really
Mm.
spoke to what their experience was. And I think that was something that was real intentional, was to make sure that there were first gen students, a year or two out of college, that were speaking to that question too. And so I think really trying to create seats at a very diverse table where they can talk about what their multiple identities maybe were and what that meant, and what it meant, I think, within the context of higher education, and even so much so that how it can be really formative on our college campuses for them to explore that question themselves, depending upon what that might mean with their perspective. But I think this book was really designed to really serve both students, current students, graduate students,
Mm.
but also practitioners, faculty, to be able to enter into a conversation and really see some multiple ways that we can continue to amplify this and why it
I
should
love
be
it.
something, especially today, that we're talking about. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. In a recent interview, you drew a distinction between students feeling like they belong versus students feeling that they matter. Could you elaborate a bit more on that distinction and why mattering might be even more critical?
I saw that we might talk about that. I really think it's important that we talk about that distinction between belonging and mattering. When I was doing some graduate work, I stumbled upon that in uh, there's a couple researchers, Daryl Cole and Adriana Kizar out of USC, and they've really looked at what does it mean to matter versus belong. Because I think we hear a lot about belonging. Do the students feel a sense of belonging? Do they feel that they belong on their college campuses? And I think mattering, do the students feel that they matter, is a much more nuanced, specific part of the conversation that I don't think we're having. And I really would love for us to lean into what that means. I even wrote this down. It really extends to like when a college student how they perceive themselves to be valued as an individual, and that others care about their personal well-being and success. Hey, that's pretty interesting, right? Does the institution feel that I'm important? And so I think that's the definition, or the real distinction is that, it's one thing to really feel, yeah, like I belong, like I can kind of hang, versus, wow, I really matter at this institution. They really value who I am as an individual. And so I think that's one thing that I really want to really identify, that I sure wish we could talk a little bit more about, do students feel that they matter? And what are we doing to create spaces where they really feel they are valued? Because I think those are two different parts of the conversation. Yeah.
Mm, that's good. That's good. That's good. Let me ask you this: what are some concrete ways? I work at a college, I work at a university. That
Right.
how we can support first generation students in embracing their multiple identities,
Mhm.
and understand what that now means as you're bringing that belonging, that mattering into the picture.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of ways that we can really, we can really design first gen programs that are, we do that carefully. I think we can do it systemically, and we can really do it comprehensively.
Mm,
So with some thought and be really strategic. I think we can really. I love high impact practices, where you can like have programs where students can really connect with one another and really connect with supportive campus allies. I'll give you an example. One thing I talked about in the book is when I was at the University of Portland, one thing that students said they wanted to do was they really wanted to connect with professors but get to know them. And so when we were designing one of our programs there, I learned that we had a couple faculty. One owned a farm that had a bunch of like berries where you could that was open to the public. And so what we did is we actually designed a program where the students went. They were from a variety of different places in the United States, 10 minutes from campus, to this professor's farm, and they picked berries and had that experience outdoors. But then we also went into the professor's barn and literally sat on a bunch of hay bales. The professor's in jeans, right, and a flannel. And she basically said, "Ask me anything. Like, what is it that you really would love to ask a professor?" And so, I thought that was such an interesting environment that we were able to cultivate, where students felt that they were disarmed and they could ask these really important questions that were on their minds. And there wasn't this real perceived power differential between a professor. Um, and we got some great outcomes from that program, from that example. So I think it's one of those things where you can really look at, if you're at an institution, what are the strengths of the institution, where are their opportunities, and how can we really find those places where we can connect, those together, and really find some beautiful music that can be played together. You know what I mean?
yeah, Doctor, you're a practitioner. This is what you do day in and day out. Someone I'm sure is watching. They're listening to this, and they're themselves taking notes, trying to think about how they can make impact at their respective college, their university. There's a question I've got here for you. It says many students juggle sometimes conflicting parts of identity. Now let's unpack that. It could be family expectations versus culture. It could be cultural practices versus academic norms. How can institutions help students navigate that negotiation, that tension of having to choose between these multiple identities?
I mean, it's a great question, and I think, the one thing that we have to do is really elevate this conversation where it's a very normal one.
Mm,
Where professors and faculty are really mindful that, hey, a certain percentage of your students in your classroom are first generation, and even though you may not identify as a first generation graduate, let's talk about what that means, right? Because I think that one thing that's tricky, that I think we know, is that there's no real one size fits all solution for first gen students. The solutions that can really help support them in the ways that they interact, the identifies that they embrace, are as differentiated as much as their identities and students themselves, right? So I think it's one of those things where we need to be open to understanding the student, really understanding what it is that they're really bringing to us, and being open to entering into that conversation of what their needs are, what's important to them. And that takes time. That takes time outside the classroom, but to create safe spaces where we can do that. Um, but I think that you mentioned this really well. One thing I've really seen is you have students that are trying to exist in multiple worlds, right? Where I'm trying to go back to grandma's birthday, party the third weekend of school, but I also have a project due for class. and trying to explain to my family why I really need to be on campus to do this academic thing
Yeah.
and not disappoint grandma that it's her birthday that I've gone to the last 20 years. And so it's hard that students are really trying to please a lot of different people in a lot of different worlds. And that's tiring, that's exhausting. And I think we need to create some space where we're allowing students to feel safe, where they can float back and forth between those worlds, but also really empower them that in being able to do that. Gosh, that makes them really just valued members of our community and so many strengths that they're sharpening. And I think that's a big part of this book too is, hey, we need to really celebrate that they're able to navigate this in ways that other students are not doing that.
Yeah, yeah, man. I gotta ask, man, where does this passion come from? It just it exudes this work. It just it oozes out of you that this is really purposeful work for you. Where does this passion come from?
You know, someone else asked me that in a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about the book, because I need to be really honest. I'm not first gen. Okay. I had two parents that went to college. I, you know, don't identify that way. And so I almost feel like that's a little bit of my own, imposter phenomenon is I'm drawn to some work that I don't, that I'm not a product of. I just am so passionate that I want students to feel that education can make them believe something about themselves that they didn't know they were capable of. And just in working with some of these students, man, they keep me going. They are just, I'm so proud of them. And when I've been able to walk with them and learn from them, the passion comes because I see that there's a need. And the passion comes even today with so many things that are uncertain to this day, even in this region, in the Idaho, Utah region, we are just in a really difficult time right now, if I'm being honest. And so I gather a lot of strength and passion because I feel that these students can walk us to the place where we're going to find hope and light into what
Mm.
we really need to do. And that is important to me. And that's what kind of keeps me going. Where I kind of wrote this book kind of as like a hobby, right? Like a lot of faculty research things as a part of their tenure. And I kind of do it on the weekends, because I think it's worth it. And I think we need to amplify that. I think the students deserve that. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, man. Thank you for sharing that. We're almost towards the end of our interview. I'm going to try to sneak one more question in here. Well, two more questions in here.
Sure.
What advice do you have for first generation students entering college now, especially one who is grappling with multiple, sometimes conflicting demands? I saw this firsthand during a lot of my service and my tenures in Texas, where the student would be first generation. Family took great pride in them being the one to finally make it to college, but the stressors and the continued pulls back to helping out with the family business, being present for the younger siblings, all these things is like we support you,
Yeah.
but what advice do you have for those that are dealing with that right now?
And that's hard because a lot of students, I think, what's when they come in, especially that first year, and maybe they're used to receiving feedback or success, having gone to high school, and they don't receive that, they take it. I've This is anecdotally what I've heard from first gen students. They take it especially hard because they feel because so much is invested in them being there as the first generation student that they got to do it the best. They got to be so successful, and they really have to deliver. And I push back on that with them. I said, I've had conversations where, when they get that first bad grade, they go, well, gosh, Matt, I'm just letting myself down. I'm letting so many people down. And I push back on that. And I go, I understand your first generation, but at the end of the day, you're looking yourself in the mirror, not your 20 members of your family. Okay. And so what I'm really interested in is, are you doing your best here? And are you really giving it the effort? You don't have to do this better than anybody else just because of, what this experience means to you. But I think what it means also is you need to be really committed and really need to be all in and really be invested in, are you using the resources that are available to you? And are you not afraid to ask for help? Right. And what I often tell students that are first generation is a lot of times asking for help is hard because you actually have to admit that you have a problem, right? And you
Mm,
don't have it, you don't actually have it all because you've done a lot of stuff on your own already. And to actually change that narrative that maybe you're not going to do it on your own here in college, might be hard and different as a part of the identity, so I think those are things that come to mind. The other thing I think that's worth mentioning too, my biggest criticism of first gen students is they are too darn humble. They don't think that being first gen is that big a deal. And it really is. And I don't think they speak to it enough. I don't think that they understand that businesses love hiring first gen students. They love hearing the narrative of what their first gen journey was like. But I think the one thing I would say to them is I know getting the degree is really important, but I want them to think of the other skills outside of the classroom besides academics that being first gen makes them so special, right? What are they sharpening and what are they bringing that's actually made them even more valuable to the community, but also allowed them to be this incredible young adult that's going to go out into the world, both graduate school or get a job. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Dr. Daly. As you know, the title of this show is Discovering Your Mission. It's a question that I love to ask all of my guests, and I'm about to ask you now. Could you please share with us in closing, what is your personal mission statement and why?
It's really simple, and I apologize that it's not great and really insightful, but I think my mission is if you're going to invest in one thing, you have to invest in people. Okay. You have to invest in people. And that can be our friend from college and writing them a letter or going to see them. It can mean investing in the students around you or your colleagues. But I think if you're going to invest one thing of yourself, invest in people and what the relationships we can have and enter into with them. And can we make that really authentic? And I think that's my mission. And I think it serves a lot of different parts of my life. But I think we think of, what can I really invest in with my day? Invest in people and getting to know them authentically. And that really is something that is sort of my North Star.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, Dr. Matt Daly, Assistant Vice President, Dean of Students, Idaho State University, and co-editor of the book, How First Generation Students Navigate Higher Education Through an Embrace of Their Multiple Identities. Dr. Daly, thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate it. It's so nice to sit down and talk with you. And thanks for the opportunity just to have a great chat about some things that are really important to us.
Thank you, my friend.
Thanks.
What an incredible conversation with Dr. Matt Daly. Matt, thank you for sharing your story, your wisdom, and your passion for helping institutions understand and embrace the full identities of their first generation college students. Your dedication to education and to people shines through in everything you do, my friend. Before we close, let me highlight 3 key takeaways from our conversation on today. First, identity is powerful. Dr. Daly reminded us that first generation students recognizing and embracing multiple identities, academic, cultural, personal, is essential to navigating higher education successfully. Second, Matt talked about institutions must create spaces where students feel not only that they matter, but that they belong. That shift changes the student experience from simply fitting in to truly being valued. Third, we heard the call to invest in people, whether through authentic faculty-student interactions, creative programming, or simply showing up. The investment we make in others is the most meaningful return we can generate. Friends, I hope you're walking away inspired to think differently about how we serve, support, and uplift the next generation of leaders. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure you head over to itsdrmordecai.com, where you can find more episodes, articles, and resources designed to help you discover and live out your personal mission. Until next time, remember, your mission matters, and the world is waiting on you to live it out. Take care.